Canberra Metalheads.
The Archives.
Me and You Season 2. Alright, let's kick it.
Hello and welcome to the interview section of Canberra Metalheads. You got Marky Malphas
and JDecay.
Joined in the studio today with Josh Nixon. How you doing, man?
Jock Nixon. Okay, laddies. It's a pleasure to be here on a Sunday.
Sometimes I go to say something and my beard just makes it sound Scottish.
Well, it is, for your listeners that haven't seen you, there's some hints of ginger. There's some Braveheart in that beard somewhere in your gene pool, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Sometimes it takes over.
Please don't axe me to death. I'm far too hungover today.
It's not going to happen, man. Unless you pull out your guitar and start using that as an axe, man, because you can wield that better than I could wield any other axe, man.
Thank you very much. It's very kind of you.
Speaking of some guitaring, man, we just listened to I Exist, Sorrow on Hill 105. You recommended that one there because you're fairly involved in the writing process. Yes.
Well, when there's 6 people in your band, it's, you've got to get in when you can. And that one's mine.
Cool.
But, most of it, Aaron put a riff on it too. But yeah, That's a bit of a riff bonanza, that one.
Sick.
But that album was a very painful process to record, but we got there in the end.
Excellent. Yeah, so you've got that one with your current project with I Exist. I recently seen you play for the 10-year anniversary at Transit Bar with, we had Witch Skull and...
Witch Skull, Potion and Bloodmouth pulled out because the drummer busted his arm playing American football the week before.
Oh, right.
Is Potion the one that got that Phil Anselmo and the illegal support this week?
It is.
Yep.
Yeah,
it is the very same.
Perfect. Yeah, Potion had some... I actually played one of their tracks in the last show.
Plowshare.
Okay.
Oh, thank God. I didn't even have to look it up, even though I am on my phone. But I did remember. And they were actually amazing. I was really, not surprised because Ro's a really good musician. He plays in Mental Cavity with half of I Exist.
Yep.
And he's filled in for me when I Exist toured Europe in 2013.
Yep.
But they were stunning black metal stuff. Just some catchy riffs as well. It wasn't just total bleak.
Yeah.
It was some stuff going on there. It was really good. 4 vocals. They all had a sing.
Yep.
It was sick.
Yeah, no, that's some... it's pretty raw, and then it had some interesting bits that just catch your eye and catch your ear.
Yeah, like some hooky riffs just out of the blue. It was good.
Yeah,
it's real good.
Intense. I like the red lighting for the entire... It's any photos anyone got would have been consistent.
Yeah.
Sometimes you go to take a photo and the strobe kicks in or something like that. They had just a very good stage presence.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
4 hooded dudes.
Yeah, exactly.
Can't go wrong with a hood.
Man, some of them were actually stacked too. Like the main bassist and guitarist had some guns on him.
Oh, well, that's that healthy vegan living. It's just pure freaking muscle tone vegetable matter coming through. Cruelty-free guns. Magnificent.
That's like a brand there.
It is.
Yeah.
You can
use
that. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, let's we just want 10% for the Canberra Metalhead boys.
So that's your current project with I Exist. But, we've got a whole plethora of things that you've done over the years. Obviously at the top of the show we heard a Pod People track as well, which you brought in for us. I don't own any Pod People physicals, so it's awesome to have one in CDs.
Yes, well, you can have that one. Unfortunately, that's the Rise Above version of the album. The original record came out on High Beam Records, which is a Wollongong label, who for a while there signed pretty much anyone with a big muff pedal in around 2000.
Yeah.
And the original artwork that I designed for that was So all of the themes of the two albums are based on Dante's Inferno, and if you unfold that, in the original, it's an upside-down cross with a map of hell based on Dante's Inferno, and it was done by Roy Talkington from Alchemist.
Oh,
it's
excellent.
been super big mates, best mates for us for forever.
Yeah.
And he's also... so until this year, that was the only Australian... We were the only Australian band to be signed to Rise Above Records and have a release on Rise Above until Witch Skull got on. And Roy did that album as well. So it's pretty weird that, like, the two bands from Australia that have been on Rise Above Records, both from Canberra, both have artwork by Roy.
Yeah.
So there's a little tip for all those Doom bands out there that may be listening from interstate. Come and move to the sunny ACT.
Yeah, excellent, man. That will, like, I know Pod People's got a big following around town, especially in the Doom scene. When I was out and about at the gig recently, there was a lot of people still talking about, previous projects and things like that. And, like, not to say that it hasn't... I Exist has only been just started. I mean, you just did a 10-year tour. That's crazy.
I'm really old. Thanks for breaking that up.
Well, it's one of those things. It's just
not as old as Witch Skull. I just want to say that again. Witch Skull, far older.
Well, they also have. It comes with experience as well. You get some. There's some awesome experience, and we had them in on the show. And Tony was telling us stories about being in Brooklyn and watching Anthrax play. There's a
first couple records are all right. And then up until, Persistence of Time, it was just like, oh, God. And then the John Bush era, I mean, forget about it. I'm out. I was out.
Well, at least we've got some album reviews there.
and for God's sake, Scott Ian, just take a break. Let someone else in metal talk. Anytime there's someone, some metal dude dies or he's got some metal thing, it's freaking Scott Ian on, the first person they go to.
Yeah.
There's other people that can talk in metal, surely.
Yeah. Eventually, but it seems like he's doing a pretty good job at it so far. He did the Australian tour and stuff like that, which
the spoken word thing. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
And so did Bruce Dickinson, and it probably cost more than to go and see the World Slavery Tour at Canberra Theatre in 1985. Which is kind of weird. I don't think too many people ripped the chairs up, though, at the spoken word thing that Bruce Dickinson did. Unlike what happened at the World Slavery Tour in 1985.
Yep.
Just think the last time any band with a distortion pedal will ever be let anywhere near that theatre, that stage.
Well, that's exactly right. Like, so... a few years back, there was like a punk art thing going on in town, and
I love punk art.
So what happened was there was they'll do an exhibition with old docs and things like that. People just going in and just looking at this punk stuff, art people, but also there was a lot of people from the punk scene there as well. And it was initiated by a gig where Standalone played. At ANU, and that was an intense gig, man, because it was like you had the art show the week after, and all the people from the gig went, oh yeah, we'll go check out the exhibition. Problem was there was a bunch of politicians there as well, because it was like a Canberra exhibition sort of thing. So there's a little. I remember being there with Reggae, and
was he being propped up by two attractive young girls whilst being unfathomably drunk?
Well, I don't know about that. All I can say is...
Well, you were there. Come on, you can suspect it out.
All I can say is there was an open bar for the first 2 hours. So
well, that explains why Reggae showed up in the first place.
But
I love him, don't worry.
So we rocked up, and we're up the back with all of the punks. And out the front was all of the politicians, and they were doing some speeches and things like that. Luckily, the PA wasn't loud enough to reach the back, but right in that midsection there was a bunch of people that were kind of just listening in and could hear a bunch of it. And I guess the conclusion basically was pretty glad the PA didn't reach the back, because a lot of those free beer bottles would have went up sailing towards the front. But it's just one of those things, man. Like when it comes to gigs and things like that, it's hard to mix theaters and like sort of
Yeah.
more rowdy crowds.
Well, I mean, that's the big challenge for Canberra, full stop. Like, when I started playing in bands, there were 5 live music venues in the city.
Yep.
And the Terrace Bar, you'll have definitely heard of, Jay, but
Yeah.
not so much
I've
yourself.
heard of.
Yeah.
Gypsy Bar.
Gypsy Bar, well, it was Terminus in those days, but yes. The Asylum.
I've heard of Zorro's as well.
Zorro's was a little after that, Shooters or something now, whatever. But, I mean, all of those places, and ANU, and especially in those days, some of the biggest shows for metal were at the Civic Youth Cafe, which is pretty much where we're sitting now, in an old car park. And there was like, I'm pretty sure it was an Addictive Exceed gig that had like 900 payers to a freaking all ages show. And some of the fests back in those days, when Alchemist was a fledgling band, and all of those, Armored Angel played a bunch of times. So a Bremelin, a classic. They used to be called Necrotomy, and what was they called before a Bremelin? Well, they were called something else. I can't remember it, but they played a massive show, one of the heaviest weekends in Canberra, and it was like Youth Cafe on a Friday night and Terrace Bar on a Saturday night, and that just used to bring in the young and the old together, and you crossed over and stuff. And one of the weirdest things, like, they talk about how the Very Fast Train is something that they've like, I literally heard on the radio when I was moving to Canberra as a kid of talking about the Very Fast Train. Still not happening. But almost as long as that, they've talked about an entertainment precinct for the city. And they just keep putting more and more apartments on top of it. And it's just too, I mean, from going to transit, they've got pretty strict curfews.
Sound restrictions and things. Yeah.
And, maybe it's scary when you've got brutal shirts instead of having people going to Mooseheads and flogging each other in the alley. It's, more acceptable as long as they're listening to Little Mix or something. So, I mean, that whole Canberra arts culture thing that you were talking about before with the theatre scene, we put a lot of stock as a city into that element of our culture. But with so many of the bands that you talk to here and you've been exploring over the time, I mean, there's a whole living, valid culture in the punk and metal scene that have come out of Canberra for well over 30 years now that just, is pretty inconsequential. And if it wasn't for Lance and the Basement dudes, would be struggling.
Yep.
But between Transit and Basement, they've looked after us, which is pretty sick. Especially Lance's, and the boys in the team there have expanded that room. That used to be the sketchiest bar. It's called a few things. It used to be it's still across the road from the Action Bus terminal.
Yeah.
So it used to be Pete's Bar and Grill or something, or Town Centre Tavern.
There, man.
Yeah.
When I used to do sound there. Yeah.
Yeah. And it used to be just full on
rough
nightmare fights blurring out across the road into the car park where Office Works is now.
Yeah, that whole thing was desolate, man. You get away with anything out there.
Yeah. They needed just like a piano in the background to be playing along while the fist fights. Yeah, while the fist fights.
It was pretty epic, man.
Yeah.
Plus, they still had the piss trough at the bar installed at the front line of it. Yeah. What was that from? The Prohibition era?
Yeah,
Canberra Prohibition era.
Yeah, it was like a clay pot.
No, the big steel grill thing.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
so you didn't have to leave the bar to go to the toilet.
Perfect.
Bring the BNS inside the bar. It's good.
From what I understood, it was also used to like just throw your cigarette butts in because a lot of people used to just smoke inside. Obviously, before the laws changed.
Yeah, it's because of the Prohibition, man. They had like you were only allowed to drink between 3 and 6 or something like that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And people would just smash the bars, man, and get your drink and
away you go.
The 6 o'clock swill or whatever they used to call it. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's
not quite that old.
Yeah.
It's had some pretty rad history. I mean, looking back, at the time it was probably fairly fairly, like you said, desolate out in the top there. The good thing is the sound restrictions are now pretty much all done, like without the restaurant next door anymore and it all being the same thing. Sound isn't a problem in that area, so it works out well.
The XY Dumpling House,
Yep.
which is what it was. And
Before
the best
that.
thing about it was the sign was so dilapidated and falling to bits that it did literally say XY Dump House for like at least 5 years, I reckon. Who doesn't want to eat there? Come on.
Yeah, exactly.
Love a dump.
And yeah, so it was Pete's, and apparently before that it was Darcy's Den back in the day.
Yeah, Town Centre Tavern for a while as well.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just going off history that I've learned just from working there and talking to people.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's good to see where it's finally evolved into, like an actual place that people can go.
But look, as good as it is, right, the point I was making before a little bit is you need somewhere in the centre of town because it's a hell of a long way to get from the south side out to the basement, which is a fair challenge, right? It's just, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, $90 cab ride.
Yeah. So, you know, it's
Definitely.
It's a shame that, you know, we're down to one venue. Like when Magpies was doing shows a couple of years ago, it was sick. They looked after us so
they had
well.
King Barrett there. I think one of the last shows I went to. Yeah.
Together. That was that tour. There's a few shows down there. We've played a couple
I
times.
played with Molotov Solution down there. Born of Osiris. A few other big kind of metalcore, deathcore dudes.
Well, Harm's Way had a massive record this year, and they played down there.
Yeah.
Twitching Tongues played down there. There's a whole bunch of good shows, but, you know, got to build them flats.
Yep. Yeah. It's
Pay for that tram with them flat money. Woo!
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully it progresses to a point where it's, I mean, at the moment the scene's alive. It's going well. Hopefully it keeps that heart beating for long enough for it to actually progress more into a closer thing, to something in the city or closer to everybody else.
Well, the band scene's happening. It's just, I think there's enough young bands and there's enough people still doing it. I mean, Jay's in at least 14 bands that I'm aware of. So him is propping up the brutal half of Canberra all on his own.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, there's a lot of good young. I mean, we talked about Play Our Share before, and Bloodmouth was the other band that was supposed to play. We're in that weird place now. Like, I Exist is considered a hardcore band, apparently. I don't hear it. I'm old, so when I think of hardcore, I think of like Discharge
Fresh.
and Agnostic Front and old DRI or something. You know, that's more what I consider it.
Yep.
And then sometime in the 90s, Hatebreed turned it into half Slayer or something. I don't know. I just missed that whole bit. That convergence of those two scenes, like, it's more like, if you think of Triple J's Tuesday and Wednesday nights, kind of the same thing almost. It's like slightly a few more blasts here and there on Tuesday, but Parkway's on, you know, the same sort of deal.
Yeah, exactly.
All night. Thy Art Is Murder, pretty bloody brutal.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, actually, Jay and I were talking about this in a previous show and also off mic. The fact that, you know, Thy Art is on a Parkway tour.
Yeah.
And the fact that that's bringing the more brutal music into the stadium crowds.
Yeah.
So it's starting to happen where people are starting to loosen up to listen to some more and get bigger crowds for more brutal bands.
Well, you know, look at Australia's festival history. Metal for the Brain really brought that the gathering of the tribes every year. It created the whole network across Australia. Parkway played a few of the later.
3 of them.
Yeah. And were absolutely destroying it at like 11 in the morning or whenever it was, whenever they started.
I Killed the Prom Queen as well.
Yeah.
They debuted at Metal for the Brain as well.
Yeah. Early noughties.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
But that's sort of then, you know, Soundwave, if you had told me when I was like 18-year-old, there's going to be 60 punk and metal bands playing at a festival all on its own and be like, you serious?
Yeah.
Big Dad had only really just started when I was turning 18 and stuff. And now we've sort of been through a few iterations of the Soundwave's come and gone sort of thing, and now we're on the cusp of Download 2. It's in good hands with Nigel from Mind Snares, one of the main guys that's putting those shows together. It's sick. It's going to be unreal. Like Priest and Slayer's last ever show, and there's going to be a bunch of young Aussie bands that get to play along it. I think that was the problem that I had with Soundwave, is it didn't bring much Aussie stuff up into the mix. It was pretty low, early in the day.
I think that was a big breaking point for bands like King Parrot that played at Soundwave. Like, that was sort of where at their time of starting to really get some recognition for their work was when they played Soundwave.
I reckon it was the video.
Yeah.
It was the Shit on the Liver video.
Yeah.
And Slats' superb acting.
Yeah.
Is
definitely.
That drove a lot. I mean, look, I've known Youngie and Slats, and I was in Blood Duster with Rizzo. I met Ari afterwards.
Yep.
And Todd was in Berserker back in the day. But those guys are road frickin' warriors. They've earned everything that they've done by playing 8 million shows, and you can't beat hard work. They were at the Arias this week with the Wiggles, for God's sake. Oh no, that was the last Arias, I think.
Yeah.
They were at the Arias again.
I've seen that.
Yep.
And there's a Canberra connection to that, because EVP Records is run by Mike Lenton, who used to work at Landspeed and Impact back in the day.
Yep.
So he was on the red carpet in a hideous Hawaiian shirt with them.
Excellent. But yeah,
that's right, man.
King Parrot, definitely, man, hands down. Like, I seen their roster from like 4 years ago. It was like 90 shows in like 96 days.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Non-stop. And that's Australia. You don't see too many people doing 90 shows in Australia, man.
Yeah.
There's only one band I can think of that have done that many shows this year, and it's a band from Brisbane called Hobo Magic.
Hobo Magic.
They're sick. They're like 70s, like they're mega young dudes. They came to I Exist, our second album launch in Brisbane. There's these 2 young dudes with a goonie at an all ages show, screaming at me to play Rush. I'm like, have you even heard Rush? Like, do you even know what you're like 3 times younger than that album. And now they're in an amazing 3-piece, and you should definitely check them out. They're a stunning, sort of doomier vibe, but a little bit groovier, cleaner vocals.
Sick.
They're
Excellent.
really cool.
Yeah, Hobo Magic.
But they've played like over 100 shows in Australia this year.
Yeah. That's it astounds me, man. Like, I can't fathom doing that many shows.
I mean, we were just pissing and moaning 5 minutes about having to drive from the south side to the basement, let alone driving from Brisbane to everywhere. So
Yeah, there's been some pretty long hauls.
Done tour life, man, but like trying to do that many shows in Australia is pretty hard.
Yeah, exactly, man. So that's pretty much I Exist and some of the previous history. We mentioned Pod People as well. Was there, and you also, we haven't really mentioned this on the show yet, you also had like a long-standing job working with BMA, writing the metal column as well.
20 years this year.
Yep.
I've been doing the column for. I only just worked that out the other day. It's pretty bizarre.
So what brought that about?
Well, I used to complain a lot to Tracy Heffernan, who was the editor of BMA back in the day, going, you don't mention, like the column used to be written by, there's a couple of good writers. So Jeff Chaplin, who used to do a show here on 2XX, Let's Mosh, remember that show? He used to write it, but after him there was a couple of people that just wrote, and it was like, we've got the internet, who cares what Slayer's doing?
Yep.
Really, no one's going to read the BMA magazine to find out, Slayer in the studio. There's all that sort of news stuff. I just wanted to put a real heavy domestic and especially local focus on the scene. And because I complained about it, she said, "Will you write the column?" and haven't stopped doing it since, and I've done over 300 columns in the meantime.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I care about music. Australian heavy music has done a lot for me. I've gotten to do and meet a crazy array of heroes and see some crazy bands and do some awesome tours and all that sort of stuff. So I like to give back where I can, and writing and promoting other bands is a simple way to do it. And you guys are doing a stand-up job on your own.
No, thank you.
Doing it, through this medium. So.
Oh, dude, yeah, that means a lot.
Yeah, big time.
Especially coming from yourself, because you've got such a broad range of experience over the years. You can tell, what's working and what's not. So yeah, thanks very much, man.
Oh, thank you.
And on the topic of BMA and writing articles and stuff like that, you mentioned that you had some album reviews that you wanted to run through maybe on the show.
Oh, I was just thought we'd have I was wondering have you started doing your end of year lists yet?
Yeah, so we've got this will be part of a series of Doom to finish the year off.
Oh, what a year for Doom. It's been so brutal this year.
Yeah. So,
it's almost sad for Witch Skull that their record came out this year, because I reckon if it hadn't come out last year, it would have been even, it's not a crap album by it. It's it's on my top 10 list.
Yeah, well, it's on Rise Above as well. So that and before that, I forgot to mention they had they were on Goat Sound before with the recording before.
Yeah, well,
it's a fairly common recording studio in the scene, isn't it?
Well, Jason PC is the bass player from Blood Duster.
Yep.
Not that album, but the album after that was one of the first albums recorded with Goat Sound.
Yep.
We did do a couple of, when I was in Blood Duster, we did I think we did the DFF EP and another EP with Goat Sound, where we would go to Toyland Studios, where a whole bunch of classic, Damage recorded there. It was a pretty standard extreme recording studio, a really good one down in Northcote in Melbourne.
Yep.
But Fuzz has always been interested in the sound side of stuff. So a few years ago, he opened a rehearsal studio / recording studio in Reservoir called Goat Sound. So when Joel and the boys mentioned that they were going to go and do an EP in Sydney, I was like, go and see Fuzz and record an album instead. And they did it in 3 days, and that's what Vast Electric Dark. So a demo that they were going to do in Sydney turned into Vast Electric Dark, which spawned all that great press and following. The STB deal and the fancy vinyl and all that stuff all came out of going down to see Fuzz.
Which I have a copy of, by the way, the Blood Splatter.
Oh, to die for. Delicious. But yeah, it's real. He's been in the grind scene forever, right, in metal. But Fuzz is he's not really, his ethos and his ethic is more punk rock. He comes from a punk rock place. He hated Soundwave because Aussie bands weren't on it. He can't stand when Aussie bands aren't given their due. He reckons it's crazy. He operates in a very ethical manner, and he will not rip you off. If you want to go and do it. I mean, the first I Exist record was the same. We were going to record here. I was only joining I Exist while Alex, the bass player, went overseas for a year. So one of the other guitarists moved on to bass, and I recorded their first album with them. We were going to do it here with a guy, and some things happened, and he wasn't available. And I said, let's just go and see Fuzz. And we went down and recorded the first record, and it was killer. And we've ended up working with him on the next two, the other two. So the second album, I Exist, we recorded with Billy Anderson, who did this year's one. Yep. We flew him out to Australia. He was a mess, but a lovable mess, and it was a really cool experience. And the dude's got more stories than you can believe. He's recorded Sleep, Cathedral. He worked on the California Mr. Bungle record. He's worked on a million records. The Pallbearer record more recently, a couple of years ago, was just stunning. But Fuzz has learned all of this stuff and assimilated. He went to New York with Witch Skull.
Exactly, yeah.
To do to Studio G again to work with Billy, because he'd worked with Billy before he knew him.
I'm glad I was right with that. I mentioned that in the previous show, and from when we had the guys from Witch Skull on.
Yeah.
So it's good that it's come full circle.
Yeah. So, Goat Sound and Fuzz, he's recording a lot of bands, and he does it real quick, and it turns out real good. And he recorded speaking of King Parrot, bringing it back, he did the Fresh Produce record that was nominated. I think that was his first ARIA nomination as well.
Oh, yeah.
So a record that he's worked on recently.
Yep.
So yeah, man, Goat Sound's pretty important down in Melbourne for the heavier and punk scene.
Yep.
And yeah, if you're not going to Old Jay's studio there and you want to do something a little bit different, maybe check out that as an option.
Yep. Yeah, right, man.
Lucifungus. So the two-piece band, they played at the Phoenix with Mule and Yoko Ono last night. It's the singer from Pod and the bass player from Pod, two-piece Doom, really killer. Should check it out. They recorded down with him earlier this year.
Yeah, awesome. No, exactly right, man. It's good when you can link everything all back up, like you mentioned with King Parrot and also Witch Skull, and then back to the Doom scene as well. So so for the Christmas list for this year, we've got a couple of albums that came out. If people haven't got them already or wanted to branch out, do you want to run us through some of your suggestions?
All right, so this is my short list for this year. We do 5 every year in the BMA.
Yep.
My short list is Hallis, Excerpts from a Future Past, really 70s vibe, proggy Doom, kind of like a pagan altar sort of style, but killer vocals.
Yep.
Really worth checking out. The new High on Fire record, Electric Messiahs, a crusher.
Yep.
Matt Pike can do no wrong. And that backs up with Sleeps the Sciences that was earlier this year as well, that no one knew was even going to come out. And even though a couple of those tunes are 30 years old, it's a ball bag tearing bonanza. Magus' Thou record is really cool, like extreme doom. They've got like that pallbearer melodic vibe going on for the music, but the vocals are a lot blacker and nastier. That's really cool. That Conan record is crushing, Existential Void Guardian. I like that they've, it's still got all the crushing doom elements of some of the older stuff, but they've brought some grindy stuff, like that third or fourth song's got like a blast in it and stuff.
Yeah. It was rad actually to see him play recently. Live, nothing beats a live gig. So
No.
it's good to hear the music and then also see him play it live as well to back it up.
Fully, that was sick. Potion that we saw the other week that we were talking about earlier, they had a cool single called Women of the Wand this year.
Yeah, we played that in the previous show already. Yeah.
So the first 2 songs they played at that show the other week were both from that release, this killer.
Yeah, right.
Yob's record this year was unbelievable, Our Raw Heart. So Mike was very, very sick. And, in the States, if you don't have health insurance and you're very, very sick, it's not a good thing. It's an expensive, bad thing.
Yep.
And he's really carried out that experience into that record. It's so awesome, that record. There's a band I think it's called Church, but it looks like it's misspelt. It's CHRCH.
Yep.
They've got like a not quite as brutally slow as Bell Witch, but getting their album called Light Will Consume Us All. I think it's like 3 songs in 11 minutes or something. A band called Tons, Filthy Flowers of Doom. I mean, come on. As if that album that's called Filthy Flowers of Doom isn't going to be sick. Sumeru's Summon Destroyer, so the Sydney band, good mates of ours. Really good live. You should definitely check them out. I reckon they've gone a bit more metal on this album.
Okay.
The guitar player has draws a whole bunch of influences from Tibetan Tibetan mythology, and it's all comes through in those. Like, it's really cool. It's got some dense concepts in there. He plays a bit more black. It's lost a bit. Like, that last record had a lot more groove in it. It's kind of a down vibe.
Okay.
But this album is just brutal. It's really good. I thought their last album was better, but I still really enjoyed Pig Destroyer's Head Cage this year. Some crackers in there. The new Uncle Acid and the Deadbeats record, Wasteland, is good, and I'd also recommend the Windhand album, Eternal Return. And that's a band that features members of a band called Cough, and with female vocals, though, in Windhand. And I mean, this year's Doom records, there's like 11 more that I haven't mentioned.
Yeah.
It's been a crazy year.
No,
But
just from what you've got there, we've got a massive list already. So.
yeah. But you got to get, obviously, if you haven't got it already, you got to get Coven's Will for the Local Boys.
Yep.
By Witch Skull. It's an amazing record. The boys right now are just doing a film clip for Breathing Blue Light.
Yep.
You might have seen some stuff on the socials with some crazy drone footage of them out in an old gold mine out in Captain's Flat. It's going to be a sick video.
Sick.
And also they're working on their documentary that was filmed while they were overdoing the recording of the album with Billy at Studio G in Brooklyn. And I've seen some of the rough edits of it, and it's really cool. It's like, I'm hoping it'll give the album a second, bit of a second wind.
Yep.
'Cause it's easy to get lost this year. There's just been so much stuff.
Yep. As well as I mentioned in a previous show, that album's also available in multiple editions. So there's like the clear, the purple, and the black.
Yeah.
I happen to be such a psycho, I own all three. But that's available for the Rise Above Records site. So check it out on that, because it does sound phenomenal on LP.
Joel will agree. I'm sure he'll tell you about it when he comes in to talk to you guys next time.
Yep. And I'm sure we'll even get a crack to listen to it on LP in the studio.
Sick.
But yeah, anyway, well, that wraps up everything we wanted to touch on, and just kicking it off there with a nice little Christmas list of songs and albums to purchase. So
A couple of stocking fillers.
yeah.
We got a deal for you on Canberra Metalheads.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. Thank you for coming in and running through some stuff. I'm sure there was a lot there that we didn't get a chance to go through. I mean, it's hard to cram everything into one interview. So I think that we'd have some more time for other stuff later on down the track. I'd love to have you in again and chat more about, the scene over the years, some bit more depth, or specific gigs, things like that.
Anytime. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. And keep up the good work. You brutal beep.
Thanks for coming in, Josh. And we'll chat to you again down the track. And for now, we'll listen to another I Exist track. Do you have a second favourite aside from Sorrow on Hill 105?
Oh, no. I hate that band. No,
kind of put you on the spot, but if there's a...
Yeah, but now you're actually making me... I told you this before. Look, but before we were on air, our listeners, the boys said, do you want to pick a song? And it's like, I don't know the names of the songs. It's the one that goes... Yeah.
Well, I have...
pick one.
How about this? If it helps, I have the double LP vinyl that you guys released. I bought that at the last show. Do you want to choose one from there, and I'll actually play the LP edition?
Oh, so vinylly. Will it sound extra vinylly and rich and analogy? Do you promise?
If not, I'll make sure it does. I'll do takes until it does.
All right, fantastic. Hang on. Yeah, oh, look, that's great. Can you do a few pops as well?
Like when it's, when you're asleep and you can just hear that vinyl needle just clicking against the end because you fell asleep midway through. You got home late and decided to put on a vinyl.
Actually, you guys are a bit more brutal. Tear down the crucifix. Chuck Tear Down the Crucifix on.
So there we have it. Josh Nixon announcing the next track, which is I Exist, Tear Down the Crucifix, here on Canberra Metalheads.
Praise Hail Satan. It's Josh Nixon, a.k.a. JJ Lahore, coming at you from the Rift Dome that is Canberra Metalheads.
Yoko. Bianca, bam.